this lesson, you'll learn how to turn a cluttered desk image into a clean, organized scene by extracting objects, replacing the background, and rearranging everything freely in Photoshop. We'll walk through using the Object Selection tool for easy cutouts, how to layer and organize your elements, and how to apply realistic perspective with the free Transform tool. Initial setup and saving the project. So the first thing that we are going to do is drag the stock image file into Photoshop. And as we do, a new composition will be created. And you can find all the assets linked in the video description. The first thing to do is go to File, Save As. At the top, name the file something like Desk Project, and make sure you're saving in a secure location, like the desktop or the Downloads folder. And you can find all the assets linked in the video description. And this next step is very important. Make sure that the file format is set to Photoshop, as it will be originally set to JPEG. Then select Save to save the project. And now we are ready to start working on the composition. Layer Preparation. In the Layers panel, select the padlock and unlock the layer. With the layer selected, press Command-J on Mac or Ctrl-J on Windows on your keyboard to duplicate this layer. Now name the bottom layer Backup Copy, and then name the top layer Main Copy. Extracting objects using the Object Selection tool. Next, let's focus on extracting the objects from this image. In the toolbar on the left, you may see the Magic Wand tool. If you do, hold right-click with your mouse to expand the view, and then select the Object Selection tool. Now your cursor should look something like this. And as you hover your cursor over specific items on the image, you'll see that they light up in pink. So the purpose of what we are going to do next is select specific items and isolate them as separate layers. Let's start with the coffee cup. As we hover our cursor, we can see that only the coffee cup is highlighted. And so the first step is to select the coffee cup once, while left-clicking with your mouse. Now hold Shift on your keyboard and also select the plate below. Now you can let go of Shift, and now you can see squiggly lines around your selection. Now make sure the main copy layer is selected in the Layers panel. And now press Command-J on Mac or Ctrl-J on Windows to create a duplicate. Now we can hide the main copy and the backup copy in the Layers panel by selecting the visibility icons. And what we can see now is that layer 1 is the coffee cup, which is isolated and on a transparent background. Now I'm going to enable the visibility of the main copy and backup copy layers, creating a black fill layer for visibility. Next, let's create a black fill layer. First of all, select the main copy layer and select the New Layer button. And with this layer selected, let's find the Paint Bucket tool. You can do this by pressing G on your keyboard. However, in this case, it's reverted to the Gradient tool. Therefore, I need to right-click on the three dots at the bottom of the toolbar, and then select the Paint Bucket tool. Now that the tool is selected, make sure that the fill color is set to black. We can reset the default values by selecting the small icon that's black and white here. And now we can see our foreground fill color is black. Next, we are going to left-click once on the canvas to create a black fill on our new layer. Now in the Layers panel, with the black fill layer selected, reduce the opacity to 50%. At this point, we can see a drastic difference and we can easily identify which layers we have already extracted. So we don't have to extract them again by mistake. Extracting more desk items. Select the main copy layer in the Layers panel and find the Object Selection tool once again. This time, select the phone. Press Command J on Mac or Ctrl J on Windows on your keyboard to duplicate the layer. And the duplicated layer will be below the black fill layer. So we need to make sure to hold and drag it above. Again, select the main copy layer, find the object selection tool, and now our objective is to extract the keyboard, monitor, headphones, and book all at the same time. Select on the keyboard once by left-clicking on it. Hold Shift and select the monitor. And as you continue to hold Shift, select the headphones. And also the book below. With this active selection around the items, press Command J on Mac or Ctrl J on Windows to duplicate this layer. And then in the Layers panel, drag it above the black filled layer. And now again, select the main copy layer, find the object selection tool, and now select the plant on the right. Hold Shift and select the books below it, and also the other book below it. Then press Command J on Mac or Ctrl J on Windows to duplicate this layer. And make sure to drag this layer above the black fill layer. Naming extracted layers. Now that's all the items that we should extract from the image. And so you can hide the visibility of the black fill layer, the main copy, and the backup copy. And now we can see that these objects have been isolated individually. At this point, switch back to the selection tool, so that you can see when you're selecting a layer with the bounding box around it. And at this point, name the layers appropriately. For example, with the first layer selected, we can name it Coffee Cup. Before you do this, just ensure that you know what you're selecting and that you are naming each item correctly. And once you have named all the layers, hide the visibility of the objects. And then enable visibility of the main copy layer. Removing desk clutter. The next step is to remove clutter from the desk and isolate the desk so that we can position our extracted objects to any desired state. What we need to do is define a hard edge where the desk meets the wall. First of all, zoom into the image by holding Z on your keyboard and the left button on your mouse, while dragging your mouse inwards. And now what we need to do is use Photoshop rulers to create a guide point, so that we can mark which parts of the image need to be deleted. If you don't see the rulers that appear at the top and left side of your Photoshop workspace, go to View and select Rulers to enable them. Now hold the left button on your mouse and drag this line down just below where the desk meets the wall. And we are going to create a sharp edge, so please don't position the guide exactly on the line, but preferably below it, like this. Now I can zoom out of the image, and if you're not familiar with how to move your composition around the workspace, all you have to do is hold space on your keyboard, which will temporarily change your active tool to the Move tool. Then when you're holding space, use the left button on your mouse to drag around the workspace. And at this point, make sure to select the main copy layer, and then select the rectangular marquee tool in the toolbar. Now hold and drag outside of the composition towards it, and then while holding, meet the edge at the other side. What should happen is the bottom edge should automatically magnetize as you reach towards the guideline. Now go to Edit, Cut, and this action will delete that selection, creating a clean desk texture. Now the problem that we are facing is that the desk is still cluttered. And of course there are many different ways to tackle this problem. However, instead of using existing removal tools or AI, we are going to create a texture cover. First of all, create a new layer, and drag this new layer below the main copy. Then name this layer White Fill. Now press G on your keyboard, ensuring your cursor is displaying the Paint Bucket tool. If it's not displaying, right-click on the three dots in the toolbar and then select the Paint Bucket tool. Next, press the arrow button here to flip the foreground color to white. Then left-click on the canvas once to fill the layer to white. With that done, we can switch to the selection tool in the toolbar. Adding Texture 1. Now select the main copy layer. Open your Assets folder found in the video description and drag in the Light Wood Texture 1 file. And now drag this layer down so it matches the edge of the desk. And you can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard for more precision. Once that is done, press the Confirm button at the top. And then select this top anchor point and drag it down until it meets the guideline. And here you can see how it magnetizes to the guideline. Now, if I left click outside of the main composition and then go to View and disable extras, this action will hide the guidelines. And now I can easily preview if my texture is perfectly aligned. If you're still unsure, you can always zoom in to double check. Adding Texture 2. At this point, open the Assets folder once again, and this time drag in the Light Wood Texture 2. Now hold Shift on your keyboard and scale this wood texture proportionately. Then position the wood texture something like this. Then right-click on it and select Perspective. And now what we need to do is hold and drag the corners to match the perspective of the wood texture as it appears in the original image. And once you reach this point, select the Confirm button at the top. Now, make sure your selection tool is selected, and select the top anchor point and resize the top edge like this. And what should happen is that eventually the edge line will magnetize to our first texture. Then I can select the right edge and stretch it across so it covers the rest of the image. And now press the Confirm button at the top. Now I can once again left click outside of the composition to see if the texture is positioned correctly. Simulating light under the desk. The next step is to simulate the light below the desk from the original image, so that we're not just left with a white background behind the desk. The first step is to expand our layer panel by holding and dragging the top edge of it. This will create more space for us to work in. Next, select the white fill layer and then create a new layer. Then name it Gradient Fill. Now find the gradient tool in the toolbar, select the gradient icon at the top of the workspace, and then select the first basic gradient icon. At the bottom, we can see the foreground color is white and our background color is black. So double-click on the black icon below the white icon and a color picker window will open. You will also notice that your cursor is now a color picker. And now what we need to do is sample the gray color below the desk. Once you have done that, select OK in the color picker window. At this point, ensure the gradient fill layer is selected, then drag from the bottom to the top on your canvas. You can hold Shift on your keyboard to keep the line straight. And we can reach the midpoint here, which looks perfect. Now, overall, this gradient color looks slightly too harsh. So now, only with this layer selected, we can navigate to the opacity control and reduce the opacity here to 55%, which looks about right. Once that is done, switch back to the selection tool and click outside of the composition to preview the changes. Next, in the Layers panel, drag Light Wood Texture 2 so it's above Texture 1, grouping and locking the desk layers. The next step is to group our layers, assuming that we are happy with the changes we made to the desk. You can do this by selecting the topmost layer in the sequence, starting with Light Wood Texture 2, then holding Shift on your keyboard, and then selecting the white fill layer. And now you can let go of Shift and select the folder icon below, which will group all of these layers together. And of course, we can always access this folder if necessary. But in this case, what we are going to do is close this folder. Now, assuming you're happy with the outcome of the composition, we are going to lock this folder by pressing the padlock icon at the top of the Layers panel. And also, we are going to lock the backup copy. Repositioning extracted items. First of all, make all the layers visible. Then, make sure the selection tool is selected. Drag the plant, the coffee cup, and the phone to the side. Then select the computer and drag it to the right, somewhere around here where it sits perfectly. And now select the plant and move it to the left. Press Command-T on Mac or Control-T on Windows to enter the free transform state. Then hold Shift on your keyboard to scale the object up proportionately. Now right-click on this object and select Flip Horizontal. Now we can press Enter on our keyboard to confirm the selection. And this is just another way to do this without pressing the tick icon at the top of the workspace. Next, select the phone object and move it to its new position. And then zoom in so we can see the object better. And with this object selected, press Command-T on Mac or Control-T on Windows to enter the free transform state. Now right-click on the object and select Perspective. And drag the right midpoint down so that the phone sits flush against the desk. Then press the tick icon at the top of the workspace to confirm the selection. Now zoom out and select the coffee cup and position it in a new area. Then hover your cursor on the corner of the coffee cup until you see the rotate icon. And at this point, you can rotate the coffee cup so it sits flush against the desk. And press the tick icon at the top of the workspace to confirm the selection. And now left-click outside of the composition so we can see everything clearly. And so, with all of that said, these are all the steps that we have to take to finish this lesson. Recap: why this workflow matters. You didn't just clean up a messy desk, you learned how to take control of a photo and make it your own. In this lesson, you've learned how to cut out objects cleanly using the object selection tool, add textures and match their perspective, and use basic tools like gradients and fill layers to add depth and lighting. Best of all, you've kept everything organized, so it's easy to edit or improve later. This kind of visual cleanup is incredibly useful, whether you're working on product photography, digital collages, or personal projects. So now, the question is, are you ready for the next lesson?